I'm Kimberly Lawrence, 34, standing in the entryway of my dream home that took me years to earn. A seven-figure mansion in Malibu that represents everything I built on my own. What I never expected was seeing my parents on my doorstep after 10 years of silence, 10 years of being excluded from every family gathering. As the founder of a tech company worth millions, I thought I'd moved past needing their approval. But watching them take in my success with wide eyes, I felt emotions I'd buried long ago resurface. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to create your own path when family let you down. Growing up in our modest colonial house in Boston's suburbs wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Our neighborhood was quintessential Middle America, kids riding bikes, Friday night football games, and weekend barbecues. My parents, Rebecca and Thomas Lawrence, built their life around traditional values and rigid expectations. Dad worked as a manager at a local manufacturing plant, while Mom taught third grade at the elementary school. They weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable enough. My two older brothers, Dylan and Mason, were everything my parents dreamed of in children. Dylan, the oldest, was captain of the football team, prom king, and had a charisma that made everyone gravitate toward him. Mason wasn't far behind with his baseball scholarship and easy social confidence. They filled our living room shelves with trophies and our walls with newspaper clippings about their athletic accomplishments. Then there was me, the youngest and only daughter. I was the bookish one, the quiet observer who preferred coding and math problems to touchdowns and home runs. From an early age, I knew I was different from the rest of my family. While my brothers spent weekends at tournaments, I was designing simple websites and teaching myself programming languages. Kimberly, why don't you try out for cheerleading? You might actually make some friends, my mother would suggest, a slight edge to her voice that implied my solitary pursuits was somehow concerning. The differences in how we were treated were subtle at first. My brothers' games were family events that required calendar clearing and elaborate tailgate preparations. My academic achievements warranted brief congratulations before conversation returned to Dylan's college recruitment or Mason's batting average. I'll never forget my 8th grade science fair. I'd spent months developing a program that could predict weather patterns based on historical data. It won first place at the district level and qualified for regionals. The night of the awards ceremony, I stood on stage scanning the audience for my family. They never showed. Later, I learned they'd attended Mason's baseball game instead. When I got home with my blue ribbon, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," before returning to celebrating Mason's winning home run. By 14, I'd developed a serious interest in computer programming. I'd stay up late reading coding books borrowed from the library, teaching myself Java and Python. When I tried sharing my excitement about creating my first functional app, a simple game, my father dismissed it. "This computer stuff is just a phase," he said, barely glancing at the screen. "You should focus on practical skills. No one's going to pay you to play on computers all day." In high school, I developed a dual life. Outwardly, I maintained my straight-A status, joined enough clubs to appear well-rounded on college applications, and attended family dinners where I smiled politely while my brothers dominated the conversation. Privately, I poured my energy into coding, building increasingly complex programs, and connecting with online communities where my skills were valued. My Aunt Jessica, my mother's sister, was the only family member who seemed to recognize my potential. During her occasional visits from California, she'd ask detailed questions about my projects and actually listen to the answers. "You have a brilliant mind, Kim," she told me once. "Don't let anyone convince you to dim your light, just because it makes them uncomfortable." Those words became my mantra as I applied to colleges. When my acceptance letter from the California Institute of Technology arrived with a substantial merit scholarship, I was ecstatic. Finally, validation that my computer hobby wasn't just a phase. My parents, however, were less enthusiastic. Caltech. That's across the country, my mother said, frowning. Boston University offered you a spot, and you could live at home and save money. This scholarship is a huge opportunity, I explained. It's one of the best tech programs in the country. My father shook his head. You're chasing pipe dreams, Kimberly. What's wrong with staying close to home like your brothers? The argument that followed was the first major rupture in our relationship. Words like ungrateful, selfish, and impractical were thrown my way. I stood my ground, though each accusation stung. By the time I boarded the plane to California, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother hugged me stiffly at the airport, while my father offered a curt handshake. Only Dylan seemed genuinely supportive, whispering, "Show em what you can do, Kimmy," as he hugged me goodbye. I didn't know it then, but boarding that plane was the first step in a journey that would separate me from my family in ways I couldn't imagine. Landing in California felt like stepping into another dimension. Palm trees, sunshine, and a campus filled with people who spoke my language, not just English, but the language of algorithms, code, and innovation. For the first time, I was surrounded by peers who didn't look at me strangely when I got excited about solving a complex programming problem. My scholarship covered tuition, but little else. While many of my classmates had parents funding their apartments, meal plans, and spending money, I worked 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at a campus coffee shop, evening tech support for the university's IT department, and weekend hours doing freelance website development. My tiny shared apartment was far from glamorous, but it was mine earned through my own efforts. Those first few months were a blurring cycle of classes, work, and stolen hours to sleep. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained a 4.0 GPA, and began building connections in the tech community. Phone calls home became increasingly infrequent and awkward. "How's the weather out there?" my mother would ask, followed by updates about people from the neighborhood I barely remembered. "Dylan's been offered an assistant coaching position," or "Mason's girlfriend might be the one," dominated their side of the conversation. Questions about my courses or projects were perfunctory, their eyes glazing over if I shared any technical details. During sophomore year, I created my first truly successful app, the program that helped students organize study groups and share notes. It took off across campus, and soon a local tech blog featured my work. When I called home to share the news, my father's response was tepid. "That's nice, but when are you going to find a real job? Companies want employees with experience, not just classroom projects." I stopped sharing my accomplishments after that. The real turning point came during my junior year. I'd developed a prototype for healthcare management software that had garnered attention from several professors and local investors. An opportunity arose to enter a prestigious startup incubator, but I needed a $25,000 loan to secure my spot and develop the concept further. My savings from 3 jobs still fell short. With my perfect credit, but limited income, I needed a cosigner. After considerable deliberation, I called my parents to explain the opportunity and ask for their help, not for money, just their signature, to back the loan I'd be repaying myself. "Absolutely not," my father declared after I'd outlined my business plan. "We're not risking our credit on some pipe dream. Do you know how many startups fail?" "I've done the research, Dad. The risk is minimal, and the potential is dash." "The answer is no, Kimberly. This isn't up for discussion." Later that evening, Mason called. "Hey, just wanted to say Mom and Dad are talking about your phone call. Dad thinks you're being impulsive, and that you'll come running home when this tech thing doesn't work out." His casual delivery of their dismissal hit harder than any direct rejection. They weren't just declining to help, they were waiting for me to fail. Thanksgiving arrived 2 weeks later. For the first time, I couldn't afford the cross-country flight home. I sat in my empty apartment, eating microwaved turkey dinner, scrolling through social media photos of my family gathered around our dining table. Everyone was their extended family, my brothers, even neighbors. No one mentioned my absence in the comments. It was as if I had simply evaporated from the family narrative. That holiday became a turning point. The next day, I made an appointment with Professor Eleanor Campbell, a former tech executive who'd shown interest in my work. Over coffee, I presented my business plan and explained my situation. "I believe in this concept," she said after reviewing my presentation. "And more importantly, I believe in you, Kimberly. Let me make some calls." Within a week, she'd connected me with an angel investor willing to provide the seed funding in exchange for a modest equity stake. No loan necessary. No cosigners required. Just belief in my vision and abilities. My roommate Alyssa became my first unofficial employee, helping with market research and branding in exchange for pizza and promises of future compensation. We worked nights and weekends, turning our living room into a makeshift office. As the prototype developed, so did my confidence and determination. Each rejection from my family transformed into fuel for my ambition. By graduation, my fledgling company had secured its first client, a small local medical practice willing to test our software. The day I received my diploma, only Dylan made the trip to California, staying just long enough for a quick lunch before catching his return flight. "They are proud of you, you know," he said unconvincingly over burgers. "They just show it differently." I nodded, but we both knew the truth. The congratulatory card they'd sent contained a brochure for job openings back in Boston, and a note suggesting I come home and start building a real career. Instead, I signed a lease on a tiny office space in Silicon Valley and committed fully to my company's growth. California wasn't just my college location anymore, it was home. The place where people believed in me. The place where I could build something meaningful without constantly fighting for validation. The first 2 years of entrepreneurship were brutal. I lived in a studio apartment so small I could touch both walls with outstretched arms. Ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches became my staple diet. Many nights I slept on the office couch to save commute time, showering at a nearby gym before client meetings. Every penny went back into the business. My big breakthrough came during a healthcare technology conference where I'd scraped together enough money for a small exhibition booth. My display was modest compared to the elaborate setups of established companies, but my software's capabilities spoke for themselves. By day's end, I'd collected business cards from several potential clients, and most importantly, caught the attention of a representative from Blue Horizon Tech Incubator. "Your integration of AI diagnostics with patient data management is exactly the kind of innovation we're looking for," said Marcus Chen, the program director, after watching my demonstration. "We should talk about getting you into our next cohort." 2 weeks later, I received $150,000 in seed funding in exchange for 8% equity. The investment came with office space, mentorship, and connections to potential clients and additional investors. Suddenly, doors began to open. My healthcare management platform, which I named CareSync, addressed inefficiencies in medical record keeping and patient communication that plagued small to mid-sized practices. As word spread about our software's effectiveness, our client base expanded. I hired 2 developers and a sales representative. Then another developer. Then a customer service specialist. 6 months into the incubator program, we landed our first major contract with a regional hospital network. The night we signed the deal, I called home, eager to share the milestone with my family. "Dad, we just closed a 6-figure contract. The company is really taking off." There was a pause on the line before my father responded. "That's nice, Kimberly. But you know these tech bubbles burst all the time. It's just a matter of time before it fails. You should have some backup plans." His words punctured my excitement like a needle to a balloon. After a few more minutes of stilted conversation, I hung up, fighting back tears of frustration. That evening, Alyssa took me out for celebratory drinks, raising a toast to proving the doubters wrong. Thanksgiving approached again, and this time I could afford the flight home. When I called to confirm arrangements, my mother sounded hesitant. "Oh, well, we weren't sure if you'd be coming. The house is pretty full with Dylan's new girlfriend and Mason's college friends visiting. We don't really have enough space." I scrolled through Facebook that evening to see my aunt, 3 cousins, and several family friends had all been accommodated for the holiday. Space wasn't the issue, I was. This pattern continued as my company grew. Christmas came with excuses about keeping things small this year. My grandmother's 80th birthday celebration somehow failed to generate an invitation. The annual summer reunion at my uncle's lake house repeatedly slipped my parents' minds when it came to informing me of the dates. Each exclusion hurt, but I channeled that pain into my work. CareSync expanded to 50 employees, then 100, then over 150. We moved into larger offices. I hired executives with decades of industry experience. Our software evolved into a comprehensive platform used by healthcare providers across 3 states. Business Insider featured me in their 30 Under 30 issue, calling CareSync revolutionary in medical practice management. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents, who had always prioritized prestige and recognition, were missing my moments in the spotlight. With my first major round of funding, I bought a beautiful condo overlooking the bay. I sent my parents photos, thinking surely this tangible symbol of success would generate some acknowledgement. The message showed as read, but went unanswered. 5 years into building my company, I made one final attempt at bridging the gap. CareSync had completed a successful Series B funding round, valuing the company at just over $100 million. I allocated a small block of shares to my parents, not enough to require any decisions or involvement on their part, just a gesture to include them in something important to me. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. Inside was a formal document transferring the shares back to me, along with a note from my father: "We don't take handouts. We've worked for everything we have." As if accepting a gift from his daughter somehow diminished him. That was the moment I finally stopped trying. I filed the letter away, buried myself in work, and accepted that some relationships couldn't be repaired. For the next 5 years, our contact dwindled to obligatory birthday texts and occasional updates through Dylan, who maintained minimal connection with both sides. Meanwhile, CareSync continued its upward trajectory. We expanded internationally, opening offices in Toronto and London. The healthcare industry took notice, and several acquisition offers came in, which I politely declined. This wasn't just a company to sell off, it was my vision, my redemption, my proof. When I turned 33, I decided it was time for a personal milestone. I'd been living modestly compared to my peers, reinvesting most profits back into the business. But now, with the company stable and thriving, I was ready for something that symbolized my journey. I purchased a stunning modern mansion in one of California's most exclusive neighborhoods. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a home theater, infinity pool, and panoramic ocean views. The house represented everything I'd built from nothing, every doubt I'd overcome, every exclusion I'd survived. 5 years after graduation, I found myself in a place I'd never imagined possible. CareSync had grown beyond my wildest dreams, now valued at over $100 million with operations across 3 countries. My face had appeared on the covers of tech magazines. Industry leaders sought my input at conferences. On paper, I was the definition of success, a self-made millionaire before 35, running a company that was genuinely improving healthcare delivery. Yet inside the beautiful office with my name on the door, I still wrestled with the echoes of rejection. Success hadn't filled the hole left by family abandonment. In some ways, it had only highlighted it. Who do you celebrate with when the people who should be proudest of you can't acknowledge your achievements? You're dealing with abandonment issues, my therapist Dr. Martinez said during one of our bi-weekly sessions. I'd started therapy not because the company's health insurance covered it, but because despite my external success, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow fundamentally unworthy of my family's love. Have you considered that their rejection isn't about you? She asked. People often respond negatively to what makes them confront their own limitations or choices. Those sessions helped me recognize that my family's distance wasn't my failure, but their inability to accept a narrative that challenged their worldview. I was supposed to fail in California, come home humbled, and fit back into the role they'd assigned me. My success threatened the family hierarchy and exposed the limitations of their vision for me. As my biological family withdrew, I built a chosen family around me. Alyssa, my college roommate, was now my company's chief operating officer and remained my closest friend. We'd weathered the ramen noodle days together and now celebrated each milestone as a team. My mentor, Professor Campbell, became a trusted advisor and surrogate mother figure, attending company events with genuine pride in my accomplishments. My executive team, early employees who'd taken a chance on a young founder's vision, formed a tight-knit circle of support. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and company victories together. These were people who saw me clearly and valued me authentically. In my 3rd year of therapy, I received an unexpected email from Aunt Jessica. We'd lost touch after she moved to Europe for work, and family updates had become scarce. I've been following your success from afar, she wrote. I'm not surprised, you always had that special spark. I thought you should know that your parents talk about you more than you might think. Your father keeps a folder of articles about your company, though he'd never admit it. There's pride mixed with resentment there. Your brothers haven't had an easy time. Dylan's marriage ended last year, and Mason lost his job at the bank. I think seeing you thrive while they struggle has been difficult for everyone to process. The email offered a window into a family dynamic I'd been too close to see clearly. Their rejection wasn't just about me, it was about their own disappointments, failures, and the uncomfortable mirror my success held up to their lives. Understanding this didn't heal the wound, but it helped me contextualize it. As CareSync approached its 7th year, I decided it was time for a personal milestone to match my professional ones. I'd been living in my condo for years, comfortable but not extravagant. After searching for months, I found the perfect property, a stunning modern mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The architectural masterpiece of glass, steel, and warm wood felt like a physical manifestation of everything I'd built: beautiful, solid, and with room to grow. The purchasing process was surprisingly emotional. Signing the final papers, I remembered my father's words about pipe dreams and inevitable failure. Standing in the empty great room, with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt a complex mix of vindication, pride, and a lingering sadness that my family wouldn't share this space with me. I threw myself into making the house a home. I filled it with art from local artists, technology that showcased innovation, gardens that brought warmth and life to the modern structure. Each room reflected different aspects of my journey: a library filled with books that had shaped my thinking, a home office designed for creativity, guest rooms ready to welcome the people who had supported me. The night before my housewarming party, I sat on my balcony overlooking the ocean, a glass of wine in hand. On impulse, I opened a box of old photos I rarely examined. There I was at 8, showing my father a perfect math test he barely glanced at. My high school graduation, where my parents stood stiffly beside me while beaming proudly in photos with my brothers. The last Christmas I'd spent at home, where I sat slightly apart from the family circle, already becoming a ghost. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of that loss, not just of what was, but of what could have been. What would it have been like to have parents who celebrated my differences, instead of trying to correct them? Who saw my success as a reflection of their parenting rather than a rejection of their values? I wiped away unexpected tears and returned the photos to their box. Tomorrow would be about celebrating with the people who had chosen to be part of my journey, who had believed in me when belief was most needed. These were the relationships that deserved my energy and attention. The past could stay in its box. Morning brought renewed determination. As caterers and decorators transformed my house for the evening's celebration, I pushed away the lingering melancholy of the previous night. This party wasn't about what I'd lost, but what I'd created. A successful company, meaningful relationships, and a beautiful home that represented it all. The housewarming party was everything I'd envisioned. 60 guests filled my home, executives from CareSync, industry colleagues, investors who'd believed in my vision, and friends who'd supported me through the journey. The atmosphere hummed with conversation and laughter as people explored the house, enjoyed catered delicacies, and raised glasses to toast our shared success. "This place is incredible, Kim," said Marcus from Blue Horizon, who'd given me my first significant investment. "A perfect reflection of what you've built professionally, too innovative, thoughtful, and rock-solid." Alyssa clinked her champagne glass against mine. "Remember when we thought splurging meant ordering extra cheese on our pizza? Look at us now." I was midway through giving a small group a tour of the media room when my assistant Jennifer approached with a slightly concerned expression. "There are some people at the door who say they're your family," she whispered. "They are not on the guest list." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "My family? Are you sure?" "They said they are Thomas and Rebecca Lawrence. And 2 men who say they're your brothers." The room seemed to tilt slightly. After 10 years of exclusion, after returning my gesture of shared company stock, after missing every significant milestone in my adult life, my parents had chosen my housewarming party for a surprise appearance. "I'll handle it," I told Jennifer, excusing myself from the tour group. With each step toward the front door, questions raced through my mind. Why now? What could they possibly want after all this time? How did they even know about the party, or find my address? I opened the door to find 4 familiar strangers standing awkwardly on my doorstep. My father, hair now completely gray, stood stiffly in a suit that had seen better days. My mother, thinner than I remembered, clutched her handbag with white knuckles. Dylan looked genuinely happy to see me, while Mason wore an expression that hovered between embarrassment and resentment. "Kimberly," my mother said, breaking the silence. "You look well." The understated greeting after 10 years of estrangement was so typically her that I almost laughed. Instead, I found myself frozen, unable to process their sudden appearance in this space that represented everything I'd built without them. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed, not moving from the doorway. "We were in California for my father started, then cleared his throat. "We heard about your success, the new house. We thought it was time to reconnect." Behind me, I sensed several party guests watching the interaction with interest. Many knew pieces of my backstory, the family that had dismissed my ambitions and then cut me out. "You could have called," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Or emailed. Or responded to any of my attempts to stay connected over the last decade. Can we come in? My mother asked, glancing past me at the elegant entryway. It's been a long trip. After a moment's hesitation, I stepped aside. As they entered, I made brief introductions to the nearby guests, watching my parents' eyes widen at the mention of famous tech investors and industry leaders. My father, who had once dismissed my computer hobby, was now shaking hands with the CEO of a Fortune 500 tech company. Beautiful home, my mother commented, her gaze sweeping over the soaring ceilings and artistic lighting fixtures. The envy in her voice was barely concealed. You've done very well for yourself. You must have gotten lucky with that app of yours, my father added, his attempt at a compliment landing like a backhanded slap. Right place, right time, I suppose. Mason stood awkwardly by the door, examining his shoes more than the house. Dylan, by contrast, seemed genuinely impressed, congratulating me with what appeared to be authentic pride. The tension was palpable, and I had no desire to create a scene at my own party. Let's talk in my office, I suggested, guiding them away from curious eyes and ears. My home office, with its wall of windows overlooking the ocean, typically brought me a sense of peace. Tonight, with my estranged family filling the space, it felt like a boxing ring. So, I said, closing the door behind us. Why are you really here? After 10 years of silence, you didn't fly across the country just to see my house. My father shifted uncomfortably, looking to my mother. She placed her handbag carefully on a side table and took a deep breath. The family business has been struggling, she began, her voice carefully modulated. The economy, changing markets, it's been difficult. I hadn't even known there was a family business. Last I'd heard, my father worked at the same manufacturing plant he'd been at my entire childhood. I started a custom furniture company 5 years ago, my father explained, noting my confusion. Used my retirement savings to get it going. Your brothers joined me after college. It was doing well until the recession hit, Mason interjected. Then orders dried up, and the bank loans came due. The picture was becoming clearer. And you're here because we need help, Kim, Dylan said directly, always the most straightforward of the family. Dad won't say it, but the business is about to go under. The house too. My father's jaw tightened at Dylan's bluntness, but he didn't contradict him. We're looking at options, he said stiffly. Various potential investors. You want money, I stated flatly. After 10 years of pretending I don't exist, you show up at my door because you need my money. That's not fair, Kimberly, my mother protested. We've always loved you. We just didn't understand your choices. Something inside me snapped at her revisionist history. Didn't understand my choices. You excluded me from every family gathering for a decade. Let me count them for you. 10 Thanksgivings, 10 Christmases, Grandma's 80th birthday, Cousin Sarah's wedding, every summer at the lake house, Dad's retirement party. The specificity of my list seemed to surprise them. I sent you shares in my company when we hit our first major valuation milestone. Dad, you returned them with a note saying you don't take handouts. But now that you need money, suddenly I'm family again. My father's face flushed with anger. We never said you weren't family. You're the one who moved across the country, who chose this lifestyle over us. This lifestyle that paid for this house. That employs over 200 people. That's changing healthcare delivery for millions of patients. I could feel years of hurt crystallizing into cold anger. How much? What? My father asked. How much do you need? My mother glanced at my father before answering. The bank is foreclosing unless we can come up with $300,000 by the end of the month. The figure hung in the air between us. $300,000, a significant sum for most people, but an amount I could easily write a check for now. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically from our last interaction that it was almost dizzying. "And if I gave you this money," I asked, "what then?" "We pretend the last 10 years never happened. We're suddenly a happy family again." Mason, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke up. "Look, we know it's awkward. But families help each other out. That's what families do." "Families," I repeated slowly. "You mean the same family that couldn't be bothered to call on my birthdays? The same family that had no room for me at holiday gatherings? The same family that told me my dreams were pipe dreams and waited for me to fail?" My mother's eyes filled with tears, whether genuine or strategic, I couldn't tell. "We made mistakes, Kimberly. We didn't handle things well." My father, seeing my resistance, shifted to anger. "This is exactly the problem. You always thought you were better than us, with your fancy degree and California lifestyle. Now you're just proving it by holding a grudge when your family needs help." Dylan, to my surprise, cut him off. "Dad, stop. You know that's not fair. We've had this conversation." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Dylan, who had apparently become an unexpected ally. He looked at me directly. "Kim, I'm not going to pretend we didn't mess up. We did. All of us. But right now, there's a real crisis, and you're the only one who can help." The 5 of us stood in tense silence, the sounds of the party continuing without us beyond the closed door. I looked at each of their faces, my father's stubborn pride even in asking for help, my mother's calculated vulnerability, Mason's resentment, and Dylan's genuine discomfort. For a moment, I imagined how easy it would be to write a check and send them away. To buy their exit from my life again, and return to the celebration with people who actually valued me. But something deeper kept me rooted to the spot, not just anger at their audacity, but a need for resolution I hadn't fully acknowledged until this moment. "I want to be clear about something," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "This isn't about money. This is about respect and recognition. For 10 years, I've lived with the message that I wasn't important enough to include, to acknowledge, to support." I turned specifically to my father. "When I called to tell you about my first major contract, you said it was just a matter of time until I failed. When I was featured in Business Insider, not a word of congratulations. When I sent you stock in my company, which is worth significantly more now, by the way, you rejected it as a handout." My mother started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. When Grandma was in the hospital 3 years ago, I only found out through Facebook after she'd been released. I would have flown back immediately, but no one thought to call me." The specific examples seemed to land differently than my general accusations had. My mother looked genuinely ashamed, and even my father's rigid posture softened slightly. "I don't need an apology, just so I can write you a check," I continued. "I need an honest acknowledgement of what happened. I need to know that you understand how your actions affected me." My father cleared his throat. "Times have been tough, Kimberly. The economy hasn't been kind to small businesses like ours. Sometimes when you're focused on survival, other things fall by the wayside." It wasn't an apology, just another justification. I shook my head. "That explains maybe the last 2 years. What about the 8 before that, when you were doing well enough to take family vacations I wasn't invited to?" Mason, always quick to defend our parents, jumped in. "Not everything is about you, Kim. We all have lives and problems. You're not the only one who's had challenges." "You're right," I conceded. "Everyone has challenges. The difference is that I faced mine without family support, while you had a built-in safety net. And now that your safety net has failed, you're turning to the person you pushed away. Dylan, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. She's right. We can't just show up asking for money without acknowledging the history here. My father's face reddened. So that's it. You're going to let the business fail, let us lose the house, because of old grievances. Is your revenge worth that? His framing of my hesitation, as revenge rather than self-protection, ignited something in me. This isn't about revenge. It's about boundaries. I'm not refusing to help you. I'm refusing to be used as an ATM by people who haven't shown me basic respect for a decade. I took a deep breath, centering myself before continuing. Here's what I'm willing to offer, not cash, but consultation. I'll have my company's business development team evaluate your furniture business, identify issues, and recommend solutions. I'll connect you with my network of investors if the business is viable. I'll help you restructure your loans if that's what's needed. Their expressions showed surprise at the counteroffer. But I have conditions, I continued. First, we start family counseling, all of us. Second, we acknowledge what happened instead of pretending it didn't. And third, we rebuild based on mutual respect, not obligation. My father's immediate reaction was to move toward the door. I'm not sitting on some therapist's couch discussing my feelings. If you won't help without strings attached, we'll find another way. My mother caught his arm. Thomas, wait. She turned to me, her expression more genuine than I'd seen in years. Your father's pride is hurt. We both know he's not good at admitting mistakes. For the first time that evening, she really looked at me, without the filter of comparison or judgment. I'm sorry, Kimberly. I'm sorry we made you feel unwelcome in your own family. I'm sorry we didn't celebrate your success the way we should have. I'm sorry we let jealousy and resentment create this distance. The unexpected apology hung in the air between us. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic, the first crack in the wall of denial they'd maintained for years. My father stood frozen in the doorway, his back to us. The rigid set of his shoulders told me he was fighting an internal battle between pride and necessity. Dad? I said quietly. He didn't turn around, but he didn't leave either. After a long moment, he spoke in a voice rough with emotion. You did good, Kim. Better than I thought you would. Better than I could have. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, this admission was seismic. Mason looked between us uncomfortably, his own position suddenly uncertain. Dylan stepped forward. I'm staying for the party, he announced. If that's okay with you, Kim. I'd like to get to know this life you've built, meet the people who were smart enough to believe in you when we weren't. The simple request, the acknowledgement of others' better judgment, felt like the first genuine bridge extended across the chasm between us. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. My parents left shortly after, my father still too proud to fully engage, my mother promising to call about setting up a meeting with my business team. Mason followed them, clearly uncomfortable with the shifting family dynamic. Dylan stayed, gradually relaxing as he met my colleagues and friends, seeing firsthand the respect they had for me. When we returned to the main party, Alyssa raised an eyebrow in silent question. Family drama, I explained quietly. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. You okay? She asked, genuinely concerned. Looking around at the home and life I'd built, at the chosen family who had supported me through it all, I found myself nodding. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in a long time. 1 week after the confrontation at my housewarming party, I met my parents at a neutral location, a private room at an upscale restaurant halfway between my home and their hotel. The setting was deliberately chosen, professional, public enough to discourage emotional outbursts, yet private enough for honest conversation. My father arrived in a freshly pressed suit, still carrying himself with the stiff pride I remembered, but there was something different in his demeanor, a slight uncertainty that had never been there before. My mother had clearly taken extra care with her appearance, her nervous smile betraying her awareness of the power shift between us. "Thank you for meeting us," she said as we sat down. "We've had a lot to think about this week." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Before we discuss business matters, I want to establish some ground rules for moving forward. This isn't just about financial assistance, it's about rebuilding a relationship on new terms." I laid out my boundaries clearly: respect for my career and choices, no more exclusion from family events, and regular communication that went beyond crisis management. In return, I would commit to reconnecting genuinely, not just as a financial resource. My father started to object to what he perceived as conditions on family, but stopped himself mid-sentence, a small but significant sign of change. Instead, he asked practical questions about how the business consultation would work. I'd brought Lawrence Furniture's financial statements and business plan, which they'd emailed earlier in the week. As promised, I'd had CareSync's business development team review them. Their analysis revealed what I suspected: the core business was actually sound, with quality craftsmanship and a loyal customer base, but poor financial management and outdated marketing strategies had created a perfect storm when economic conditions tightened. "Your furniture is exceptional," I told my father, genuinely impressed by the photographs of his handcrafted pieces. "But you're reaching less than 5% of your potential market with your current approach." Over the next 2 hours, we outlined a restructuring plan that would address the immediate crisis and set the foundation for sustainable growth. Rather than simply handing over cash, I would connect them with specific resources: a financial advisor specializing in small business restructuring, a digital marketing consultant to build their online presence, and introductions to my network of interior designers who could become valuable business partners. "And the house?" my mother asked, her primary concern still the potential loss of their home. "I'm establishing a business loan with favorable terms," I explained. "Not a gift, a legitimate investment in the company's future, with a clear repayment schedule." The structure was important to me. I wasn't rescuing them. I was believing in their business enough to invest in it. The distinction preserved both their dignity and my boundaries. As the business discussion concluded, Dylan arrived, having flown in that morning. His presence lightened the atmosphere. He had always been the family peacemaker, and his genuine effort to bridge our worlds was touching. He brought news that he had already begun researching family therapists who specialized in estrangement and reconciliation. "Mason's resistant," he admitted, "but he'll come around eventually. This is important for all of us." Throughout the meeting, I observed subtle shifts in my parents' perceptions. When I spoke about financial projections and marketing strategies, my father listened with newfound respect. When I mentioned my upcoming keynote at a healthcare innovation conference, my mother asked genuine questions instead of changing the subject. Small steps, but meaningful ones. As we prepared to leave, I made one additional announcement. "I've decided to establish an educational trust for Dylan's children and any future nieces or nephews. College, trade school, entrepreneurial ventures, whatever path they choose, the funds will be there to support their dreams." The decision had come to me the night after the housewarming confrontation. While I wasn't ready to bail out my parents directly, I could ensure that the next generation would have the support I hadn't. Education had been my pathway to independence. I wanted to offer that same opportunity to their children. Dylan's eyes glistened with emotion. "That's incredibly generous, Kim. You don't have to dash." "I want to," I interrupted. "Family should support each other's potential. That's something I believe in strongly." The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on my parents. Over the following months, our relationship entered a careful rebuilding phase. The weekly family therapy sessions were uncomfortable at first. Decades of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings surfaced painfully. Mason attended reluctantly, his defenses high, but even he began to recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped our family dynamic. My father struggled most with the emotional vulnerability required, often retreating into silence when conversations became too raw. But the structured business collaboration gave us a parallel track for reconnect on. As Lawrence Furniture began implementing the recommended changes and seeing positive results, his resistance to my other boundaries gradually softened. 3 months after our initial meeting, I received my first invitation to a family dinner in over a decade. The evening was awkward at times, with conversation occasionally stalling into silence, but it was a start. My mother made a point of asking about CareSync's latest developments, and my father showed me his newest designs on his tablet, seeking my input on their marketability. While working to heal these biological connections, I continued to nurture the chosen family that had sustained me through the years of estrangement. I converted the guest house on my property into an innovation lab for underprivileged youth interested in technology and entrepreneurship. Twice monthly, local high school students gathered there to learn coding, business planning, and creative problem-solving from CareSync volunteers and industry mentors. Many of these kids are like I was, I explained to a local reporter covering the program. They have the potential and passion, but lack the support system to develop their talents. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is simply believing in someone's capacity to succeed. The irony wasn't lost on me that the rejection that had once wounded me so deeply had ultimately fueled the determination that led to my success. The family that couldn't accept my dreams had inadvertently pushed me to exceed even my own expectations. Now, that success had created both the problem, their financial crisis bringing them back into my life, and the solution, the leverage to establish healthier boundaries. As I reflect on this journey, I've come to understand that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I can acknowledge the pain of the past while choosing not to let it determine my future. I can maintain appropriate boundaries while still opening myself to genuine reconciliation. True healing isn't about erasing history, but about creating a new narrative moving forward. The most profound lesson I've learned is that family isn't defined by DNA, but by consistent support, respect, and celebration of each other's authentic selves. Sometimes that means the family we're born into. Sometimes it means the family we create along the way. Today, I move forward with a broader definition of family and a deeper understanding of my own worth. I navigate these relationships with wisdom earned through difficult experiences, choosing connection without sacrificing self-respect. The mansion that became the setting for our confrontation now hosts both my chosen and biological families at different times, a physical manifestation of the life I've built on my own terms. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family while still maintaining a relationship? How do you balance forgiveness with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding success against the odds. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the people who believe in you least are the ones who teach you to believe in yourself the most.